Several years have passed since the events I'm about to describe, but they remain vividly etched in my memory. A close friend of mine recently encouraged me to share my experience with divorce, suggesting that writing it down might help me process everything. So here I am, attempting to express what happened and hoping to bring some clarity amidst the chaos of my emotions. This marks my first attempt to post something of this nature, and I ask for your understanding regarding any peculiarities in my writing style. I am a 37-year-old man, and my wife is 31. Our journey together began quite a while back, and for many years, I believed we were the picture of a happy, conventional suburban couple. In my eyes, we were living a life that many would envy. Our relationship had its ups and downs, as any long-term partnership does, but I never could have anticipated the storm that was about to hit. Even before tying the knot, we had cultivated an open relationship that seemed to work well for us. We navigated it without issue. We were comfortable, financially stable, and seemingly thriving in our personal lives. Our intimacy was satisfying, and the mutual love and respect we had for one another felt solid and unwavering. Together, we raised two wonderful children, a spirited 16-year-old daughter and an energetic 9-year-old son. Socially, I thought we maintained a healthy balance, enjoying outings with friends and family. However, like many couples, we hit a rough patch that tested our bond. The grind of long work hours began to take a toll on our relationship, limiting the time we spent together and leaving us both somewhat emotionally drained. I started to notice subtle changes in her behavior. My wife became increasingly absorbed in her phone, often texting her girlfriends at odd hours. At first, I brushed it off as typical modern-day behavior, but as time went on, her actions began to raise alarms in my mind. She grew more protective over her phone, distancing herself not just from me but also from our children. These changes were not easy to ignore and prompted me to make a concerted effort to bridge the growing chasm between us. I committed to leaving work on time more often, volunteering to help around the house, and focusing on spending quality time with her. Despite these intentions, it felt as if we were slipping further apart. The more I tried, the more elusive she became. Her emotional detachment escalated, and it was during what was supposed to be a joyful occasion, the celebration of our son's 8th birthday, that I uncovered the truth. The house was bustling with family, friends, and colleagues, everyone sharing laughter and good times. My wife's parents were present, and the atmosphere was filled with joy. As it came time for our son to blow out the candles on his birthday cake, she handed me her phone, asking me to capture the moment. Just as I was about to take the photo, a text notification popped up on the screen. The words flashed before me, "I love you very much, baby, I miss you." The world around me faded for what felt like an eternity as I stood frozen, grappling with the realization of what I had just read. My wife's voice broke through the haze, urging me to take the picture. I somehow managed to force a smile, but inside, my mind was racing. After snapping the photo, the reality of the situation hit me hard. The number that had sent that message was not saved in her contacts, leaving me with a shroud of mystery and confusion. My thoughts churned with questions. How long had this affair been going on? Had they crossed boundaries I wasn't even aware of? It became increasingly clear that there was more to this than met the eye. That night, after our guests had left and the children were tucked into bed, I walked into the bedroom. She was already fast asleep, exhausted from the day's festivities. Quietly, I retrieved her phone from beneath her pillow and made my way to the bathroom. My heart raced with a mix of dread and determination as I attempted to comb through her messages, emails, and anything I could find that would give me insight into her secret life. I even tried to access her Messenger app, but without the password, I was blocked. It was painfully evident that she had taken significant steps to cover her tracks, which explained why I had not caught on sooner. Frustration and anger bubbled within me as I returned to bed, staring at the woman I had trusted for so many years. I was resolute in my decision to uncover the truth about what had been happening behind my back. A few days later, I came home early with the intention of spending some quality time with the kids while my wife was out grocery shopping. In a turn of fate, I decided to charge our son's old tablet phone, which we kept around for emergencies. It was then that I stumbled upon something I never expected to find. Her Facebook Messenger was still logged in. Curiosity propelled me to enter her account, and what I encountered sent me spiraling into a world of disbelief. The screen revealed an array of explicit messages exchanged between my wife and a man named Lewis. As I read through the torrent of texts, the reality of their relationship unfolded before my eyes. There were countless inappropriate messages and even scandalous photos of both my wife and this man. The depth of their emotional and physical connection was painfully clear. She had disclosed her feelings for him and articulated that she no longer loved me. To add insult to injury, she criticized our intimacy, claiming that Louis could satisfy her in ways I never could. Plans for a future together were laid bare, as she discussed leaving me to start a new life with him, using my insecurities and vulnerabilities against me as weapons of ridicule. Reading those messages was an unbearable experience, filled with a sense of betrayal that cut deep. I felt an overwhelming wave of emotion wash over me, almost bringing me to tears. The gravity of the situation hit hard, and I knew I had to take action. I started capturing some screenshots, intending to prepare myself for the inevitable confrontation with my wife when she returned home. Just as I was lost in thought, a text message popped up on my phone from someone I'll refer to as Craphead. The message asked if their plans for the upcoming weekend were still on. The following day, my wife responded with an enthusiastic, "Yay honey," which made my stomach churn. Craphead proceeded to share the name of the hotel and his room number, a detail that struck me as both foolish and incredibly fortunate. With this information, I decided that confronting them at the hotel and exposing their affair would be my next move. Knowing their location and room number made it all too easy to set up the perfect surprise. My primary concern throughout this whole ordeal was for my children. I couldn't shake the anxiety about how their lives would change once my wife returned from the supermarket. When she finally came home, I found it difficult to look her in the eye. The weight of the situation loomed heavy between us. Instead, I left the house to gather my thoughts. I consulted with a lawyer to explore my legal options, had a couple of drinks to steady my nerves, and began devising a plan. To my surprise, when the next day rolled around, my wife acted incredibly kind to me. She suggested a spa weekend with her friends, saying it would be a way to relax. Upon her return, she proposed that we go on a vacation together to rekindle our relationship and focus on our marriage. I wholeheartedly agreed, reassuring her that it was a fantastic idea and that I was willing to do whatever it took to strengthen our bond. However, I was also thinking strategically, so I contacted my attorney to draft a comprehensive separation agreement that would set a move-out deadline for my wife, establish weekend visitation rights for the children, and suspend child support until the divorce was finalized. She had no idea about my intentions, and while she prepared to leave for her spa weekend, she expressed her love for me as I wished her a good time. As soon as she left, I sprung into action. I went straight to the bank, closed our joint and money market accounts, and obtained a cashier's check for her portion. I deposited my half into a new account, effectively separating myself from our shared finances. Afterward, I returned home and went to my office, where I printed around 35 pages of Facebook screenshots to gather evidence of her infidelity. I intentionally delayed my departure, hoping that my wife and Craphead would become more comfortable before I made my entrance. I also reached out to her parents, inviting them to join me for the surprise. They expressed initial concern and questioned the nature of the surprise, but I was able to reassure them enough to persuade them to come along. Additionally, I managed to get in touch with Louis's wife through his Facebook account. It wasn't too challenging, but when I initially tried to call her, there was no answer. So I decided to drive to her address and explain the entire situation. At first, she broke down in tears but eventually agreed to come along with me. We arrived at the hotel around 12:30, and to my relief, her parents were already there, albeit looking puzzled and questioning the whole scenario. They had no idea what was about to unfold and were completely unaware of who Louis's wife was. I took a moment to calm them down before we moved on to confront my wife and Craphead. Upon reaching their hotel room, I knocked and introduced myself as the hotel manager, requesting to speak with Louis. When Craphead opened the door, wearing nothing but a towel, I could clearly see the shock wash over his face. He turned pale and attempted to speak, but his words were cut short as his wife slapped him hard across the face before storming off, with him trailing behind her. Inside the room, I could hear my wife asking, "Who is it, babe?" I stepped in with her parents, finding my wife dressed only in a towel. The color drained from her face as she saw us, and she burst into tears. Her mother joined her in sobbing while my wife, usually the pride of her family, began offering excuses and denials, claiming it wasn't what it seemed. However, I made it clear that I was not there to argue. I handed her the divorce papers and presented the printed text messages as evidence of her betrayal. I also informed her that I planned to email this information to everyone we knew and even give a copy to our daughter so she could see the truth about her mother. The reality of the situation hit her hard, and I could see the panic in her eyes as she worried about how all this would affect her professional reputation and how our children would perceive her. I handed her a check for half of the money in our joint account, letting her know that I had withdrawn my share from all of our other shared accounts, sealing the fate of our relationship once and for all. From all the other accounts we shared together, this one moment gave her the opportunity to find a new place to live. The realization hit her hard, and she began to cry even more. Her parents stood in the lobby, silent yet visibly emotional, shedding tears as they witnessed the unfolding drama. I could feel the intense whirlwind of emotions swirling around her. It was palpable. She looked at me, confusion and hurt in her eyes, and asked why I was doing this to her. Deep down, we both understood that she had brought this situation upon herself. I instructed her to sign the divorce papers and leave them at the house when she came to gather her belongings. As I turned to leave, I remarked that she was free to continue enjoying her time with Louis. I approached her parents and expressed my regret that they had to witness this difficult moment. They responded with understanding, suggesting that we both consider seeing a marriage counselor before making any final decisions. However, my resolve was already firm. As I walked out, I crossed paths with Louis and his wife, who were engaged in a heated argument downstairs. I couldn't suppress a slight smile at the sight, thinking he deserved the turmoil he was experiencing. Our exchange was filled with tension, and when he asked if I was happy, I shouted a triumphant yes. Climbing into my car, I shed a few tears but managed to gather myself enough to drive away. The details of her evening or the weekend were a mystery to me, yet she inundated me with texts and calls, desperate to talk things over. I decided to turn off my phone to escape the barrage. On Monday, she came to speak with the kids, explaining that mommy and daddy needed some time apart, all the while reassuring them of our love for them. She continued to offer apologies, conveying her desire to mend our family, admitting that she was lost in her choices. However, I had no intention of ever taking her back. The betrayal was too deep. Later, Mrs. Lewis reached out to thank me for my actions, and we struck up a friendship. Eventually, she initiated the divorce herself. When we went to court, I sensed the judge's sympathy towards me. He asked the kids for their statements regarding who they wanted to stay with, and they both chose to remain with me in the home where they had grown up. My ex-wife cried when the divorce was finalized, and I was granted the house, having to buy out a small portion of her ownership, which was a manageable task. I also obtained primary custody of the kids, who were content and adjusting well. Despite her repeated calls suggesting reconciliation, I remained resolute. That chapter of my life was closed. Update: I wanted to share some recent developments since many people have reached out, eager for news. It's been several months since the divorce, and I am doing well, settled comfortably with the kids. However, the atmosphere in the house has felt odd. The living room, once lively with family interactions, has become almost deserted, a space none of us frequent, including the children. I've found myself working late intentionally to avoid dwelling on the emptiness. I've chosen to ignore her completely, but after learning about the 180 technique, I've started applying it, maintaining a civil yet distant demeanor in my interactions with her. This approach has been worthwhile because ignoring her made me feel heartless over time. It took a toll on my own feelings, leading me to mistakenly feel like I was the one who had wronged her instead of the other way around. The only time I strayed from this approach was last weekend. She had come over to see the kids, and I unexpectedly walked into the bathroom to find her sitting on the floor near the bathtub, crying. I helped her up and embraced her, though it felt more like a gesture of comfort than anything affectionate. The unfortunate reality is that I have become so distrustful of her that I wouldn't have been surprised if she had staged this moment just to evoke sympathy. I have completely moved on from my ex. She occasionally visits to see the kids and often boasts of her willingness to do anything to salvage our marriage, eager to convince me that her actions were nothing more than a foolish mistake. However, it's clear that she is in a terrible state. She has lost her job, and her physical appearance reflects her struggles. I am convinced that she would say anything to escape her current situation, especially since her boss discovered the details of our divorce. After learning about the situation, it became clear that the entire story had left me feeling deeply dissatisfied and ultimately led to my decision to terminate my relationship with her. I discovered that she and Louis had decided to stay together for the time being. It crossed my mind that she might be trying to provoke feelings of jealousy in me, but at this point, it really doesn't matter. I stand by every word I expressed in my original post. The affection I once held for her has completely dissolved into nothingness after I read those painful things she wrote. I can no longer regard her as my true love, the individual I once confided in and trusted with my life. Instead, I have come to see her as someone who is easily disposable, a presence that must be removed to prevent any further emotional turmoil. She attempted to persuade me to reach some kind of compromise, proposing that we could revisit our situation in 3 or 4 months and consider couples counseling before making an ultimate decision about our relationship. However, I am not willing to entertain that plan. The very thought of spending Christmas in the same house as my estranged wife makes me feel physically ill. I know she would try to create the illusion of a perfect family gathering, but I have absolutely no interest in participating in that charade. Interestingly, her friends have been quite supportive of me. They've kept me informed about the developments in her life. It reminds me of Louis and the difficult time he went through during his own divorce. He lost a lot, including custody of his child and their family home. Not long after his divorce, he showed up at my house looking like a shadow of his former self, completely broken. When he confronted me, he mistakenly blamed me for ruining his life, and honestly, I couldn't help but find some humor in the absurdity of the situation. He was clearly struggling and in a state of despair. Shortly after that confrontation, he lost his job, his wife contacted his boss and disclosed everything, which did not please him in the least. She even shared printed copies of all their private messages with his colleagues, and that led directly to his termination from work. Given the circumstances, I felt compelled to take protective measures and contacted the police to obtain a restraining order against him. Now, I've learned that my ex-wife and Louis are living together. However, I have heard troubling accounts indicating that he does not treat her well and often lays the blame for their issues squarely at her feet. She appears to be noticeably pale and isolated, lacking any real friendships. There are moments when I feel a flicker of sympathy for her, and occasionally I allow her to stay overnight. But I remain cautious in how I interact with her. Meanwhile, I've started to date again and am currently in a relationship with a wonderful woman I met at a gathering thrown by friends to help lift my spirits following my divorce. I won't disclose her name, but she has been nothing short of a breath of fresh air in my life, especially after my diagnosis of depression. We've been together for 2 months now, and she has integrated well with my children. I've even broached the subject of her moving in with me, which has understandably upset my ex-wife. She still holds on to the fantasy of us being a family once again and continuously implores me to reconsider my decision to divorce. Despite her persistent pleas, I have made it clear that there is absolutely no way I am going back to that life. She seems to believe that she can somehow win me back, no matter the cost. A few weeks later, I received an unexpected call from my attorney's office, who informed me that my ex was attempting to reopen our divorce case. She was claiming to have new information, stating that she was pregnant with my child. This revelation left me bewildered, as I found the prospect implausible. I had considered her to be deceitful, and we had not been intimate even prior to the divorce. I shared my concerns with friends, who reassured me that this was likely a desperate ploy to try and reconcile. It made little sense to me how becoming pregnant would salvage the situation, particularly since she was living with Louis. My lawyer advised me not to worry unduly and mentioned that a paternity test would be necessary to establish any claim of fatherhood. Deep down, I genuinely worry about her mental state and believe she might benefit from consulting a psychologist. The following day, she came over and made a scene in front of my girlfriend, emphasizing that she was pregnant and trying to assert her role as the mother of my children. I had to firmly ask her to leave and made it abundantly clear that if she wished to see her children, it must be at her place, and she should not return here. Her reaction was explosive, filled with screams and accusations. She refused to comply with the request for a paternity test and insisted to anyone who would listen that the child was mine, all the while claiming I was plotting to replace her with a new partner. A few weeks later, I received a call from Louis's wife, who revealed that she was reconciling with him. Reconciliation with him led to a heartfelt confession where she admits that her feelings for him have not faded, she still loves him deeply. She candidly expresses her belief that he has suffered enough in their relationship and mentions that he will be moving back in with her very soon. In the midst of this emotional moment, I share news about my ex-girlfriend and her unexpected pregnancy. Surprisingly, she responds with determination and intent to work things out, not hesitating for a moment. As a result, LS decides to leave my ex behind, effectively returning home and leaving her alone and pregnant. While I can empathize with her situation and the pain she must be feeling, it is evident that the circumstances were largely of her own making. Amidst all of this, I find myself contemplating a new chapter in my life, considering marriage with my current girlfriend and the possibility of relocating away from this house. This idea of a fresh start fills my mind as I look towards the future. Now, let's shift to another compelling story. I am a 35-year-old man married to my high school sweetheart, Caroline, who is currently 32 years old. Caroline was in the year below me during our school days, and from the very start, she had a crush on me. It didn't take long before I started developing feelings for her as well. Our relationship blossomed throughout our college years, and those around us often remarked on how special our bond was. Friends would frequently claim that long-distance relationships never succeed, but we stood as proof to the contrary. The journey was not without its challenges, yet our strong commitment to one another fueled our determination to make it work. We were undeniably in love and willing to put in the effort required to nurture our relationship. Eventually, as I established my career and Caroline approached the end of her college journey, I proposed to her. It felt like an easy decision since neither of us could imagine a life apart from one another, making it pointless to delay our union any longer. We both eagerly anticipated spending our lives together, but with the passage of time, we began to see changes in our relationship. At first, our marriage felt like a typical experience for newlyweds, marked by a honeymoon phase where we were utterly enthralled with each other, constantly drawn to one another. As the years rolled by, the initial thrill began to fade, but we remained a happy couple. We filled our days with love, continuously surprising each other with small gestures that kept the flame of romance alive. These acts were effortless expressions of our feelings, not forced or contrived. To provide some context, I completed my business education and prepared to take over my father's business. As his only son, there was never any pressure from him to step into that role, but I had always been passionate about entrepreneurship. I fondly remember visiting my dad's office as a child, captivated by his interactions with clients and the way he poured his energy into his work. It became clear to me at a young age that I was destined to follow in his footsteps. After graduating from college, I dove headfirst into the business world, driven by a strong determination and an unwavering work ethic. My father was a guiding force during this time, readily pointing out my mistakes and offering invaluable assistance. Although I made a few missteps early on, I understood that these were crucial stepping stones toward future success. Over time, I honed my skills in managing the business and began gaining recognition and praise for my efforts. Following our marriage, Caroline decided to step away from her job. Earlier, she had been employed at a company, but just a few months into our marriage, she made the choice to quit. This decision came as a surprise to me, as I've always been supportive of a partner's career ambitions. I wanted Caroline to pursue what she was passionate about and to excel in her career. Despite my encouragement, Caroline had a different vision for her future. She expressed her desire to take a break from work to embrace homemaking, focusing on cooking and engaging in activities that brought her joy. I tried to reason with her, highlighting that such an extended break might hinder her career progression and make it difficult to return to the workforce later on. However, she firmly insisted that this was her true desire, and I respected her choice. Given my good income, financial contribution wasn't a necessity for our household. Anything she earned rightfully belonged to her, and I believed in maintaining that balance in our relationship. I took pride in the notion that as a husband, it was my role to provide for my family. However, I soon discovered that when she decided to leave her job, she was not entirely honest with me. While she claimed she was merely taking a temporary break, I happened to overhear a conversation she had with her mother that hinted at a different story. One morning, I woke up earlier than usual, a quiet stillness hanging in the air as the day began. It was during this time that I overheard my wife, Caroline, speaking softly to her mother about a significant life decision she had made. She revealed that she had decided to quit her job permanently, explaining that she preferred to enjoy the benefits of what her husband earned rather than work herself. Hearing those words felt like a sudden jab to my heart. The pain I felt wasn't necessarily because she chose not to work, but rather because of the way she had chosen to communicate that decision. It raised numerous questions in my mind. Why had she felt the need to hide this from me? I believed I had created an environment where she could share anything without fear of judgment. I loved and respected her choices, no matter what they were. In hindsight, it hurt to realize that after all these years, there was still a barrier between us, one that kept her from feeling completely comfortable and honest with me. It was a painful realization, signaling a fracture in the trust that I always thought we had. In that moment, I made the decision not to confront her directly about what I had heard. I didn't want her to think I was snooping or intruding on a private moment between her and her mother. Instead, I chose to keep my feelings bottled up, to act as if nothing was amiss between us. Life continued as if nothing had happened, but inside, I became hyper-aware of my behavior and actions. I felt driven to ensure that I was giving her no reason to doubt my trustworthiness. I made a concerted effort to create a safe, secure, and comfortable atmosphere at home, treating her with kindness and thoughtfulness. Caroline, embracing her new role as a homemaker, turned her focus to our home life with remarkable results. She filled our days with her culinary talents, preparing mouth-watering dinners that I looked forward to each evening. Her cooking skills and baking expertise were outstanding. I marveled at her creativity as she explored new dishes and cake recipes, often achieving delicious results that filled the house with warmth and aroma. Not only did she excel in the kitchen, but she also had an incredible eye for home decor and interior design. The way she curated our living space was remarkable. She effortlessly kept everything updated, transforming our home into a warm and inviting sanctuary. I truly admired her commitment to maintaining our surroundings, especially when I compared her efforts to those of others I knew whose partners also stayed home but didn't share the same level of enthusiasm or skill. Caroline had a natural talent for aesthetics, working with colors and arrangements in a way that always felt pleasing to the eye. Despite this transition into her new lifestyle, which seemed to bring her genuine happiness and peace, I couldn't shake off the lingering question about her decision to conceal her job resignation from me. It gnawed at me, an unshakable curiosity about what might lie beneath her choice. I wanted to believe that her newfound role was fulfilling and that she was completely happy, yet a part of me couldn't help but wonder if there was a deeper issue that needed addressing. Fast forward a couple of months, and we found ourselves in the middle of a minor disagreement revolving around the topic of starting a family. We had been married for 3 years, and everything appeared to be perfectly fine, but a yearning for children had started to grow within me. When I broached the subject with Caroline, I made it clear that I would never pressure her to do something she wasn't comfortable with. Her body, her choice, was my firm belief. However, I was frustrated by her unwillingness to engage in a civil discussion about it. Instead of having an open conversation, she became defensive, storming off and slamming doors, which only added to my disappointment. It was becoming increasingly apparent that our communication had deteriorated significantly. It was disheartening to realize that we couldn't have a simple conversation without her reacting with anger. This time, I made the choice to hold back rather than rush in to make amends. I believed it was important for her to acknowledge her behavior first, and I waited for her to approach me when she was ready. Unfortunately, that moment never came. I eventually fell asleep on the couch, hoping for some resolution during the night, but she never emerged from the bedroom. The next morning, I found her in the kitchen, going about her routine of preparing breakfast. I stood there for a few moments, silently hoping she would initiate a conversation, but instead, she acted as if I weren't even there. This indifference only exacerbated my frustration, leading me to stop trying to reach out to her. If it didn't matter to her, I thought, then why should it matter to me? I retreated to my office, immersing myself in my daily routine, even though I secretly hoped for a text or a message from her. Disappointment set in when the day passed without any form of communication. In the evening, I returned home, expecting to find Caroline there, but to my surprise, she was missing. It was unusual for her to be out at that time without letting me know. This absence struck me as odd, prompting me to check the kitchen for a note, but there was nothing left behind. I reached for my phone again, scanning for any messages or voicemails that might explain her absence, but found only silence. But there were none. I even tried calling her multiple times, but she didn't answer. This silence was unusual and unsettling. As I went about my day, I couldn't help but notice the absence of the usual scents wafting from the kitchen. She hadn't prepared lunch or dinner, which was a rare occurrence in our household. Normally, we would share meals together, discussing everything from our day-to-day happenings to deeper conversations about our future. I waited for her to return, telling myself that I wasn't really angry anymore. Instead, I thought it might be a good opportunity to make amends and clarify what I had meant during our conversation the previous day. With Caroline's love for pasta in mind, I decided to prepare it for us as a peace offering. After finishing the cooking, I checked my phone once more for updates, but again, there was still no response from her. My concern began to grow as I realized that her behavior was out of the ordinary. I started to fear that something might be seriously wrong. Feeling anxious, I reached out to some of her friends, hoping they could shed some light on her whereabouts, but none of them had any idea where she might be. My anxiety escalated with each passing minute, leading my mind to wander into all sorts of unsettling scenarios regarding her safety. I continued calling her, but my attempts were met with silence. Just as I was on the verge of leaving the house to seek help, Caroline finally arrived at the door. The moment I saw her, a wave of relief washed over me, and I was overcome with joy, wrapping her in a heartfelt hug. However, I couldn't help but scold her for her mysterious absence. To my surprise, she seemed rather nonchalant, brushing off my concerns as if I were overreacting. As we sat down to dinner, her demeanor shifted when she saw that I had prepared pasta for us, a dish she could never resist. She smiled, and in that moment, the tension between us seemed to ease. She apologized for her behavior, and I took the opportunity to reassure her that I only wanted to discuss the topic of having a baby, emphasizing that I would never pressure her into it unless we both felt ready to embrace parenthood. We reconciled, and I expressed how worried I had been during her unexpected absence. Caroline then explained that she had gone to visit her friend Sarah, who had invited her over. She hadn't informed me because she was still upset with me, and to complicate matters further, her phone had run out of battery shortly after our conversation. Feeling a mix of relief and lingering worry, we went to bed. Caroline quickly fell asleep, but I lay wide awake, unable to shake off the events of the day. Thoughts raced through my mind, replaying moments and conversations, making it impossible to find peace. Something felt off, and Caroline's behavior was completely out of character for her. I struggled to reconcile this with the considerate and loving person I had married, someone who had always prioritized open communication and mutual respect in our relationship. Now, it seemed as though that strong foundation was beginning to crumble, with Caroline withdrawing from communication and disregarding my feelings. Doubts crept in, and I began to wonder if our relationship was falling apart. 2 days later, while at the store purchasing some items, I stopped by to buy Caroline's favorite chocolate with the hope of rekindling our love. It was a small gesture, but I thought it might help bridge the gap that had formed between us. As I approached the checkout, I unexpectedly ran into Sarah. She greeted me warmly but then inquired about Caroline's well-being. I mentioned that she should know since she had just met Caroline the previous day. However, Sarah appeared puzzled and clarified that she hadn't seen Caroline since last month. Confusion and concern washed over me. I suggested that I might have misunderstood, but as I drove home, a sinking feeling settled in. I couldn't shake the thought that my marriage might be on the brink of collapse. I felt a growing intolerance for dishonesty. Where was Caroline, and why had she lied to me? Upon returning home, I handed Caroline the chocolates I had bought, and she was genuinely delighted. We engaged in our usual light-hearted conversation filled with laughter, though I felt like I was pretending. My mind was preoccupied with thoughts about who Caroline had been with the previous day. As she drifted off to sleep, my curiosity got the better of me. I couldn't resist the urge to investigate further. I took her phone and unlocked it, checking her call and text history. To my astonishment, I discovered that she had been frequently calling my best friend Simon nearly every day. This revelation deepened my suspicions. Simon had been my friend since childhood, the son of my dad's closest friend, and we had grown up together. The implications of what I had found weighed heavily on my mind, intensifying my concerns about the trust and integrity of my marriage. Simon and I had a long history together, having attended the same educational institutions from our early years through college. This path led us both to inherit our father's businesses at the same time, a responsibility that came with its own set of challenges. While I embraced the weight of that responsibility and approached my work with a level of dedication that kept me focused and driven, Simon seemed to take a different route. His interests veered away from the serious demands of the business world, as he had a strong inclination towards socializing and partying. It became clear that his heart wasn't in the work, a fact that stemmed from a lack of genuine interest in business, compounded by the pressure he felt from his father to step into the role of a business owner. Simon didn't feel he had much of a choice in the matter, and that disconnect became evident over time. In contrast, my relationship with Caroline blossomed seamlessly amid the backdrop of my friendship with Simon. Their friendship was long-standing, rooted in our shared experiences, and it made me feel more at ease as I started dating Caroline. I valued their camaraderie and was genuinely happy to see them getting along so well. Throughout high school and college, the three of us spent significant amounts of time together, creating shared memories and enjoying each other's company. I felt incredibly fortunate to have both Caroline, my partner, and Simon, my best friend, alongside me through different phases of life, navigating its ups and downs. The day after my meeting with Simon, I decided to connect with him once more, spurred by a blend of curiosity and concern. My intention wasn't to interrogate him about any suspicious calls I had received, but rather to assess for myself if something felt off during our time together. I made my way to his office, only to find it empty as usual. His business was suffering due to his habitual carelessness and unprofessional behavior. I reached out to him by phone, and he told me to hang tight for a few minutes while he wrapped up whatever he was doing. When he finally arrived, he greeted me with his typical infectious enthusiasm. He offered me food and drinks, to which I simply requested a coffee. As we chatted, we covered a range of topics, and I felt a sense of normalcy in our conversation, which made it difficult to shake the nagging feeling in my gut. Just as I was about to leave, Simon casually inquired about Caroline's well-being, admitting that he hadn't caught up with her for some time. He suggested organizing a reunion dinner, something I accepted with a smile, thinking it would be a lovely idea. However, as I walked out of his office, that unsettling feeling burgeoned within me, convincing me that Caroline could be cheating on me with Simon. I didn't need concrete evidence to validate my suspicion, it was something I could perceive in the instability of his gaze. Although it was clear to me that something was amiss, I understood that I needed solid proof before I could confront either of them. Once home, I continued to act as though everything was fine while Caroline took a shower. Seizing the opportunity, I quietly installed a tracking application on her phone. This app would grant me access to her texts, calls, and various activities, allowing me to gather any incriminating evidence I needed to prepare for what I was contemplating, a divorce. The next morning, my first priority was to reach out to my lawyer. We had an in-depth conversation about the situation, during which I made it abundantly clear that I had no intention of sharing any of our assets in the event of a divorce. I felt strongly that Caroline didn't deserve a single cent of what I had worked hard to build. My lawyer explained that if I could present substantial evidence of her infidelity, it would significantly impact the outcome of the divorce proceedings. With a resolve to uncover the truth, I diligently monitored Caroline's phone, and before long, I stumbled upon the critical evidence I needed. Their exchange of texts was nothing short of appalling, filled with words that pierced through me like daggers. Caroline disclosed her plans to file for divorce within weeks and revealed her intention to share whatever financial benefits she gained with Simon, with the ultimate goal of marrying him. The realization that she was genuinely in love with Simon was a gut-wrenching moment for me, adding layers of betrayal to an already painful situation. I captured screenshots of their conversation to provide me with ample evidence to bolster my divorce case. I immediately sent these screenshots to my lawyer, who reacted with optimism, ready to initiate legal proceedings and file a lawsuit against Caroline. That day, I made a conscious decision to avoid returning home. I was resolved to interact with her only in a courtroom setting, feeling that any further communication or interaction would be unbearable. Her presence had become intolerable to me, so I chose to rent an apartment, understanding that the case would take some time to resolve and that I couldn't stand to be around her during that period. Meanwhile, Caroline received the divorce notice, and I was confident it caught her completely off guard. She flooded my phone with texts, demanding to know what the notice meant and inquiring about my whereabouts, but I chose silence. Soon, she would come to terms with the repercussions of her actions in multiple ways. As legal proceedings commenced, I prepared myself for my court appearance, steeling myself for the confrontation that awaited. During the legal proceedings, everything seemed to align in my favor, primarily because of the solid evidence I had meticulously gathered over time. These proceedings dragged on for several months, each day filled with the weight of uncertainty and the looming finality of it all. Ultimately, after what felt like an eternity, the case concluded in my favor, bringing me a sense of relief amidst the chaos of emotions. Throughout this challenging period, Caroline made several attempts to reconcile with me, consistently reaching out to apologize for her actions. Despite her efforts, I chose to uphold a facade of indifference, a protective shield to prevent myself from acknowledging the deep pain and betrayal I was enduring. As the situation unfolded, it became glaringly evident to everyone involved that Caroline had little to gain from the divorce. She had no personal savings, having opted not to work throughout our marriage, and her connection to me had been increasingly driven by my financial status rather than any genuine affection. The realization of her infidelity, particularly with my best friend, further compounded the betrayal. It was clear that Simon, my best friend, was also motivated by my success, seeking to gain access to my wealth through his relationship with Caroline. This duplicity shattered the trust one had once placed in both of them. In the aftermath, I opted never to engage in conversation with Simon again. He, too, seemed to sense the gravity of the situation and wisely kept his distance, likely anticipating the negative reaction he would incur if he tried to reach out. As expected, Simon did not proceed to marry Caroline after the dust settled, his primary ambition having been financial gain, which ultimately did not materialize. Upon uncovering the truth behind Simon's actions, which I learned through my father, his own father's reaction was one of immense disappointment and disgust. Simon had been handling his father's business poorly while I was focused on elevating my own, a stark contrast that deepened the rift between our families. Coping with the trauma of being betrayed by both my wife and my best friend proved to be an incredibly difficult journey. I had lost two of the closest individuals who had stood by my side for a significant portion of my life, and the landscape of my existence suddenly appeared harsh and unwelcoming, pushing me down a path toward depression. Throughout this tumultuous period, my parents emerged as my unwavering support system. Their presence provided a comforting reminder that I was not alone in my struggle. My mother, seeing the turmoil I was in, encouraged me to seek therapy, urging me to address my emotions in a constructive way. Although I was initially resistant to the idea, I ultimately decided to heed her advice, and I am grateful that I did. Therapy became a vital tool in my healing process, allowing me to confront my grief and cope with a myriad of emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. It played a crucial role in preventing me from sinking deeper into despair. Several months later, I unexpectedly encountered Simon again. During that encounter, I found it nearly impossible to suppress my anger towards him. The feelings of betrayal surged within me. I came dangerously close to resorting to physical violence, but fortunately, the office personnel intervened just in time to prevent any altercation. After that moment, I learned that Simon's business endeavors were on the brink of collapse, a consequence of his own recklessness and incompetence. He was grappling with significant losses, facing numerous challenges that stemmed directly from his poor decisions. In the midst of my own struggles, I found solace in immersing myself once more in my business. This focus provided a welcome distraction, helping me to forget, if only temporarily, the troubles that had befallen me. Over time, as the pain gradually lessened, I began to find a sense of healing. Life has a way of moving forward, allowing one to navigate through the remnants of distress. I've managed to overcome the intense anguish that had been thrust upon me, and I now take pride in the person I have become as well as the position I hold today. Despite facing numerous challenges along the way, the ease with which I can now reflect on my past pain is a testament to the progress I have made. It signifies that I have truly moved forward, emerging stronger and more resilient in the process.